everyone. Welcome to Carrazco Law's first official podcast. Today we have one of America's best attorneys here sitting with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Angel Carrasco. I am the founder of Carrazco Law, and we've had this firm for about 20 years.
Okay, that's really cool. Do you mind telling me what made you want to start Carrazco Law?
It wasn't anything specific. I knew that coming out of the neighborhood like Santa Ana, Orange County, that there was a large need for professionals, specifically doctors and attorneys. They were underserved. The community was being underserved and probably still is. So, as a member of the community, I decided to attend Cal State Fullerton, and I left to Spain for a couple of years, and that's when I became interested in the law. It was very challenging, but at the same time, I knew that the community, at least where I was growing up, it was very underserved by professionals. And so my dream was to either go to medical school or become an attorney. And the challenges that I would face to get there, I knew were going to be difficult. But mainly the primary reason was to come back home and serve my community as one of the professionals now known as an attorney. So that's where I've been. I started in Los Angeles in Century City doing business litigation. Actually, it was complicated business litigation. So most of my clients were not people that looked like me. They were very different, mainly white, older gentlemen, very wealthy. And I stayed in that area of the law for 5 years, and eventually I ended up building enough money to start my own firm and come back to Santa Ana. And when I did, I started from scratch. I had zero clients. I started doing something completely different, which was workers' comp, personal injury, and civil rights cases, which is the three areas that I currently do and been doing for 20 years.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. So Carrazco Law specializes in those three departments only?
Yes, we specifically just do workers' comp because it's an area that's underserved, especially by Latino lawyers. It's very underserved. I ended up buying a firm when I came back to Orange County about 2 years after being here, and I took over the workers' comp area, and with it, they came a bunch of personal injury cases, which is the second area that we do. And I ended up serving those two areas because they were very much underserved. And finally, I started as I became doing a lot of federal work where I worked before. The natural path was going to be to go into civil rights in federal court. Section, it's called 1983. It's the Fourth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. Basically, when the police abuse their power and shoot and kill people or citizens or victims, that's where we do the federal civil rights cases. So the three areas that I practice are workers' comp, personal injury, and civil rights cases.
Wow, that's really, really cool. So, what is the process for a client to be able to be of service here exactly? Like, what's the routine that if there's a client that needs something to be resolved, how exactly do they come to Carrasco Law and get the help that they need? Do you guys have like free consultations or anything like that here?
Absolutely. Everything we do here at Carrasco Law is based on a consultation for free. We don't charge. It's called a contingency agreement if you retain our services. We get a percentage of the final result. For example, since we have three areas, every area is very different. Personal injury, workers' comp, civil rights. So when it comes to, I'll start out with civil rights. When it comes to civil rights cases, the clock, as you see it, the clock is clicking. Why? Because you have a certain amount of time to file a claim. You have about 6 months from the date the wrong was done. From that date, the clock is ticking. So if you come here a year later, your claim is forever lost. Unless there's some kind of miracle where you file a document to try to extend what we call the statute of limitations. What does that mean? The statute tells us that you have, from the date the wrong is done to you, a total of 6 months to let the government know, in this case, usually the police department, the city, the county, the state, depending on who committed the wrong, you got to let them know the wrong has been committed within those 6 months. It's a form that you fill out and you let the government know, or the police department, whether it's the local police that did the wrong, the county, which is usually the sheriffs, or is it the state, like California Highway Patrol. Once you do that, your claim is preserved. That means you have a right to proceed to the next step. What is that next step? The government has around, I would say, 2 months to accept your claim. And that means, look, we did something wrong, or deny your claim, which says, whatever you're submitting, it's BS. You don't have a claim. 100% of the time, at least in my experience, it's been the latter, which is you have a BS claim. I've never seen, maybe one in 20 years, where they said, yeah, it's my fault. I did it. I will compensate the victims. That doesn't happen. Usually they deny it. And from that time period, you have a limited amount of time to file a lawsuit in court. So if you don't file it within that time frame, your right to do so is forever gone. The amount of time that you usually have is 6 months from the date it's denied, or if you don't hear from them, you can file it after 60 days. The statute says about 45 days, but you want to give yourself an extra 15 days. So let's say a wrong has been done. Let's say the LA County sheriffs have shot and killed a person, and they're saying, look, it's not our fault. You submit your claim within that 6 month period, then it's denied. Once it's denied, you wait for the 60 days, and then you file a lawsuit in federal court. Why do you do that in federal court? Because you have federal causes of action, the Fourth Amendment, and what we call the 14th Amendment, and you also have state causes of action, which are going to be like negligence, assault, battery. You do that because in federal court, you can move the case a lot faster. You can get results within a year. You can go to trial within a year. You can get the personnel files of the shooters or those involved that did the wrong. In state court, it's going to take you forever. And if you file in state court, what the defense is going to do, because you have federal causes of action, they're going to move the case into federal court. Now, there's a way strategically to make decisions of whether you want to stay in state court or federal court. There's advantages to both. In federal court, you get 8 jurors, and 8 out of 8 have to agree when it comes to trial. That means 100% of them have to be convinced. On both sides, by the way. It's not just on our side or the defense side. So if you don't get 8 out of 8, you get a mistrial and you have to do it again. In state court, you don't have to get 8 out of 8. In state court, you just have to get 9 out of 12 to agree on each question you have on a document that looks like a verdict form. It's just a 2 to 3 page document, and they fill it out. First question is, are they negligent? Yes or no. 9 have to agree. And if 9 say yes, then you go to the next question. They call it the substantial factor, but a different 9 jurors can agree. It doesn't have to be the exact same ones. So that's one of the advantages of state court with state causes of action, and one of the advantages with federal court is that you move the case a lot faster. In state court, you'll be there for 3, 4 years, 5 years. It just sometimes it takes forever to get there. You eventually get there. Federal court, usually not. There's no nonsense. You move the case very, very fast. You get the personnel file, you get the disclosures, you start getting into those depositions right away. It's just a lot more efficient. So strategically, you can decide on which route to take. And I think I've said enough about federal and state cases and civil rights cases. There's a lot more to that. There's a lot more strategy involved. But there's advantages and disadvantages in both courts. It just depends on where you want to be. Most lawyers, in fact, I would say 99% of the attorneys out there are very comfortable with state cases and staying in state court. They don't like going to federal court. Why? Because the rules are different. The rules of civil procedure are different. The rules of disclosures are different. The rules of having to provide reports from experts are different. And you're in trial within a year usually. In state court, it moves very slow. You're comfortable, and it takes years to get the case to trial. So every case, strategically, you have to make that decision and see which, where you want to be. That's why the 1%, which is Carrazco Law, we do both. We do federal and state, and we are very comfortable in being in both types of venues or courts. We're very comfortable with being in federal court. We have a lot of cases in there. We know the judges. We expedite them. We move very quickly. In state court, obviously, we're very comfortable as well. And state courts out from San Diego all the way up to what you call Ukiah, Yolo County, way up there close to the next state in Northern California. So we cover from the south to the middle, all the way to the north, all the state of California. In federal court, we also go to other states. You're allowed to, if you're an attorney that asks for permission to be in another state, but you have to ask for permission and be in that federal court only. You're not allowed to be in state courts in other states unless you can also ask for permission. But typically, we can practice in federal courts in every state of the United States. Now, the other area that we do, which is a little less complicated, it's called personal injury. And that is sort of like the bread and butter of Carrazco Law. That and workers' comp. So personal injury, someone gets involved in an accident. They're involved in an accident, so what do you do, right, when something happens? The first thing you want to do is make sure you get as much information as you can. Also, if there's damage to the vehicle, make sure that you take pictures, because the pictures tells what? 1,000 words. So you want to do that. You want to make sure you get the information of the other driver or any other witnesses that are around there. Why is that important? Because when this happens, people usually tell the truth. But once they talk to the insurance company or others and they say, oh, you know what? I thought it was my fault, but now I'm learning it's my fault. You can completely do a 180 and change your story. It wasn't my fault. Wait, you said it was. No, it wasn't. And the insurance company's telling me it wasn't. So why should I be responsible? So that's why it's very, very important that you get as much information from witnesses, from pictures, from the other side. You exchange insurance. you exchange driver's license, and make sure you get all the information there. And from there, when you contact a law firm, if you usually you're going to need help. Why? Because it's not an easy way to get this resolved. First of all, you have two types of cases. The first one is the property damage, which has to do with your car and any property that you have inside the vehicle. That's called a property damage claim. The second one has to do with you, the person. It's called a personal injury claim. So you have both. You want to resolve both. Usually, I tell my clients, if you want to get the car resolved, go through your insurance. Let's go through your insurance. That's why you have that. But wait a minute. It wasn't my fault. Why should my insurance pay for it? Because it gets done a lot faster. It's a lot easier to deal with your friend than with your enemy, which your enemy is the insurance on the other side. They're going to try to save every nickel, every dime, every penny. They're going to nickel and dime you. They're going to say, you don't need this for the car. You do need this for that. Oh, that was already there. Why should we pay? Oh, this is an older car. Wait, you put a new system, radio system in there? Why should we pay for that? So right away, they're trying to save money. They're trying to discount your claim for property damage. That's why you want to go through your own insurance. It's a lot easier to deal with them. And you sometimes don't even have to pay the deductible up front if it's not your fault. They cooperate with you. They go out there and inspect it. They find out what's wrong with it. They go the extra mile to see if there's anything underneath that's been damaged. So my advice, we try to resolve the property damage through your own insurance first. However, if you don't have what they call comp and collision, which is the way you resolve it with your own insurance, then we got to deal with the other insurance. And that's going to be a hassle for the most part. Why? Because first they got to figure out who is at fault. And they won't know that. It takes time. The insurance has to do their own investigation. So you're going to have to deal with that time frame. You're not going to have a car. You're going to want to get a rental because obviously you probably have to get to work in the mornings, or you got to take your kids to school, or you need a way you got to move. So very important. If you learn anything, learn to look at your insurance. Look at it, become educated on it. Why? Because that determines the coverage that you have. I just told you comp and collision for property damage. That helps you tremendously because you're dealing with your own insurance. Second, if you have rental coverage. Why? Because they'll give you a rental, your own insurance will. They'll get you a car and they'll take care of that. It's a lot easier to deal with that. Now, the other type of insurance on personal injury cases, they're called medical pay. What does that mean? The insurance have a section in there. It's very inexpensive. It's super inexpensive, almost for free. It's called MedPay. And if you're injured or not, or something's wrong with you, you have the right to use that insurance for whatever medical need without being questioned. So if you have that under your own insurance, you can go to the urgent care. You can go get an ambulance. You can go to the hospital. A lot of people are hurt or are hurting, but they don't go right away because they're thinking, well, who's going to pay for the bills? What if my medical insurance doesn't cover? What am I going to do? I don't want to have that expense. So MedPay is in that policy that will help you pay for either $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on the coverage, and you are going to be covered at least with those emergency bills that you have, without you thinking about it twice. The third type of coverage is what you call uninsured motorists, also known as underinsured motorists, UIM. What does that mean? That means if somebody hits you and they don't have insurance, your own insurance will cover you. It's called uninsured motorist insurance. Guess what? 1 out of 3 drivers don't have insurance or there's issues with coverages. So there's a high probability or chance that you will be hit by someone that does not have insurance. You want to have what we call uninsured motorists to cover yourself, to cover your family in your car, to cover your loved ones, your friends. Anyone that goes into your vehicle will be covered by what we call uninsured. There's also called underinsured, which is pretty much very similar. That means if somebody hits you, and let's say they have the minimum policy of 15,000. It's a 1530 in the state of California, which, by the way, I have great news. Next year, it's going up to 5,100. So you're going to be covered a minimum policy of $50,000 next year. It's in a lot of states. California's the lowest of all states. I don't know why. But in California, currently it's a 1530. That means 15,000 per person, 30,000 for the whole thing of personal injury coverage. Next year, it's going to be 50,000, 100,000 of coverage, minimum coverage. So it's going to be a lot safer for the drivers. There's going to be access to more money from the insurance, and it's going to make your life a lot easier next year. Now, let me go back to the topic of underinsured. Underinsured means that if, let me just make sure I'm clear, if you have a coverage of what we call 1530 and they hit you and you end up being in the hospital, you end up getting a fractured back. So that means that the person that hit you, they're going to say, here's the 15,000. You're covered. That's all I have. And under the law, that's all I'm obligated to pay you. So they'll pay you the 15,000. But let's say you come back and you say, look, I have a bill. My bill at the hospital alone is $70,000. How is it that you're only going to pay me $15,000? Well, guess what? Under the insurance coverage, that's all that they're going to pay you. Yeah, well, I'll go over and, take him to court. Guess what? If you get a judgment, they can get rid of it through bankruptcy because it's not what we call an intentional tort. That means you have to intentionally do something. Like, for example, if I punch you intentionally, or I assault you, or I do it intentionally. This is usually negligence. That means that you did it and it wasn't, you didn't do it on purpose. So if it's negligence and it's only 15,000, that's all you're going to get from that person. And it's not worth, in my opinion, going through the whole 3 to 4 years of prosecution and getting a judgment and then trying to see if you're going to get paid, and then they file for bankruptcy 7 years later. It becomes more of a headache. So if you get hit by someone that only has $15,000 and you have a value of $100,000 of your case because you have a bill of $70,000, what you have to do under underinsured is get coverage. Let's say you have a 100, 300 of underinsured, of liability, of personal injury. That 100 will cover you for $85,000. So what the law says is that you get the 15, you subtract it from the 100 that you have of underinsured, and now you're entitled to another $85,000.